Hi, this is Ari Kopel with Shattering the Matrix. We have a very special guest today, which is Michael Tellinger. Michael is an author, scientist, and explorer, and has become a real-life Indiana Jones, making groundbreaking discoveries about ancient vanished civilizations at the southern tip of Africa. And his continued efforts and analytical scientific approach have produced stunning new evidence that will force us to rethink our origins and rewrite our history books. Michael Tellinger has become an international authority on the origins of humankind, especially vanished civilizations of southern Africa. New archaeological and scientific discoveries made by Michael and Johann Hein and a team of leading scientists show that the Sumerians and even the Egyptians inherited all their knowledge from an earlier civilization that lived at the southern tip of Africa more than 200,000 years ago, mining gold. Michael has authored Slave Species of God, Temples of African Gods, Adam's Calendar, and his latest book is Ubuntu Contributionism, a blueprint for human prosperity, coming out real soon. And the books that have been out already, they have become favorites with readers in over 30 countries. Michael is also part of the Ubuntu Movement and the Ubuntu Party, and he's currently running for president in South Africa. So, Michael, thank you so much for joining us tonight. What a wonderful treat our listeners are going to have.
Thank you very much, Ari. And, as you say, he's running for president in South Africa.
Absolutely.
It really brings a smile to my face. It's really funny. If people don't really know what's going on, if they're new to this, then it sounds really... I guess grandiose, but it's none of that. It's just really because the Ubuntu Party is registered as a political party in South Africa, and we will be contesting the elections. And I'm the founder of the party, which by default means I'm running for president. Yes.
That is a wow. And on top of everything else that you do, because it's not enough, because you don't do enough. You're running for president, which is amazing. Absolutely. So you've got my vote. If it counts, you've got my vote for sure.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome. So. I wanted to, because we do have a lot of things to cover within the short amount of time that we have. And I really wanted to get the listeners up to date with who you are and what got you to be who you are today and the kind of work that you're doing, because obviously it just didn't come out of thin air. I think behind the scenes, you told me something that was extraordinary, and I totally resonated with it because I share almost the same type of enthusiasm as a child, what got me to be who I am today. So if you could kindly just tell the listeners, what got you interested in this whole thing, what made you become this Indiana Jones type of person, and all that wonderful stuff. So get us up to speed, if you don't mind.
Thanks, Harry. Well, yeah, as you said, I told you, off air, that when I was a young child, I grew up in a very free family. No doctrines imposed on me or anything like that. So I was allowed to do what I want, explore what I want, think what I want, and I was always looking at the skies as a young child, wondering, when are those people that live out there in space going to come visit us, and tell us the stories about their beautiful planets and how awesome it'll be to travel to the many, many planets out there and meet all these amazing people that live out in the universe. And that was completely unprovoked by anybody. It just came to me naturally as a young child, from the age of about 5 or 6 already.
Wow, that's like me too. Wow.
Yeah, and then by the age of 18, when I was first year at university in 1978, I stumbled upon the work of Erich von Däniken, which I believe Eric's work had a huge impact on millions of people around the world. And it did the same to me. And I suddenly realized that I'm not the only one thinking like that there must be millions of people thinking like that. And that was it. That was just I was never to look back again. And then I was studying pharmaceutics at that stage at the University of the Witwatersrand in Johannesburg, and I was actively involved in the arts. While I was studying, I was involved in music and theater and television and film. And when I finished studying pharmaceutics and I graduated in 1983, I then carried on. I didn't go into that field because I didn't really fancy working for a pharmaceutical company or in the industry. I just loved the subject of human anatomy and genetics and microbiology and organic chemistry and how it all works together. But that also showed me something very important, that many deeply troubling questions that remained unanswered, that I came across while I was studying, were just not being addressed by the course and by the medical school that I was in, and many questions, that were really troubling me about our anatomy, our DNA, our genetics, the cellular structure, molecular biology, and how all this stuff works, were just ignored and just accepted because somebody said so.
Yeah.
And that I didn't like that at all. So while I loved the study of chemistry and all that, I realized that there was a lot that I had to go and research and find for myself outside of the walls of academia.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that many people that have gone through university will understand what I'm talking about. That academia is not necessarily a place where you go for knowledge. It's a place where you go to become indoctrinated. But that's something we can talk about a little bit later.
Yeah, exactly.
And so I started reading everything that I could lay my hands on, and eventually I ended up reading Zecharia Sitchin, discovered his incredible work, and everything else you can think of in that genre of literature. And by the year 2005, I realized that there was something lacking in all these books and literature that I was researching and studying, and there wasn't a book that sort of pulled all the different diverse areas of science together and laid it out on a platter, a chronological, step-by-step, simple, easy to read and easy to understand for the layperson on the street, chronological step-by-step approach towards human origins, global religion, how it all fits together, and how our DNA is not what we think it is. Exactly. And the conclusions that we reach from that, which includes obviously Sumerian tablets and the ancient texts and so forth.
Yeah.
And that's when I sat down and I wrote Slave Species of God.
Wow.
And I guess I must have done something right, because it keeps selling.
Wow.
It keeps getting translated into more languages every year. And little did I know that when I wrote Slave Species of God, I would shortly afterwards meet Jan Heine, who then introduced me to the stone circles of Southern Africa, showed me the stone calendar that he discovered, that nobody was paying attention to. By the time I met Jan Heine, by the way, he had already been photographing the stone circles of Southern Africa for about 15 years, trying to bring it to the attention of the academics and the universities and archaeologists, and they just completely ignored him.
Wow.
Until I met him, and suddenly he found a sounding board in me who had a channel to a global audience, and he shared everything with me that he could. Well, I took that knowledge and information and I took it to a whole new level by doing my own research and exploring the calendar site that Johan had discovered in 2003, and realizing that it's actually an ancient site known by African shaman, specifically Credo Mutwa, who was initiated there in 1937 as a young shaman. And I realized that we're dealing with an ancient civilization that has never been seen before, that covers most of Southern Africa, that comprises of more than 10 million stone circles or circular structures, where they've sort of affectionately become known as the stone circles. Mm-hmm. That this is actually connects us to an understanding of ancient civilizations, of advanced knowledge of laws of nature and physics and technology, displaying incredible technology that we can't even begin to understand today. And that led me to writing the book Adam's Calendar, followed by Temples of the African Gods, and doing lectures about it around the world for the last 5 years.
Wow.
But at the same time, while I was writing Slave Species of God, I realized that in my research into the origins of humankind and the origins of civilizations and this thing called money suddenly popped up.
Yeah.
And it struck me that money was not a consequence of evolution. It was not a consequence of barter and trade for thousands of years that eventually led to the creation of money. I realized that that was absolutely very far from the truth, that there was actually a time, a very specific point in human history, that money was synthetically created and introduced to the human race as a tool of enslavement by a specific group of individuals. And I realized that we don't need money to survive as a species, because that is actually the tool of enslavement and the hurdle to all progress and the obstruction for humanity to reach unbridled heights of achievement in every area of science and discovery. Yeah. So I started in 2005, while I was writing Slave Species of God, already formulating the philosophy that I then called Contributionism, where people live in societies of their own choice without being forced through socioeconomic pressure to live in a specific town or city or wherever you're forced to live because of the job that you hold down. I started formulating this philosophy called Contributionism, and where people live without any form of money, barter, or trade, only to realize several years later that this form of social structure had been in existence before on planet Earth in very basic tribal communities. And in Africa, this social structure was known as Ubuntu. And that word is becoming more and more popular around the world. And Ubuntu basically means that we all live together, and I am what I am because of who we all are is often a quoted expression of Ubuntu.
Wow.
But in essence, it means that people live in united communities where everybody contributes their God-given talents or their acquired skills for the greatest benefit of everyone in their own community. And it is that led me to formulate a whole new philosophy on a social structure that functions without money. And this is my new book that you mentioned, which has just been released in South Africa this week.
Oh, wow.
And I hope to get it out into the United States and into the UK and Australia, wherever else I can, over the next 2 months. So hopefully by March 2014, it should be available pretty much in most English-speaking countries.
Wow.
And so that's where we are. It's so at one moment you start researching the origins of humankind, ancient civilizations, and little do you expect to suddenly run into exploring and researching the royal bloodlines that were the original bankers, that were the bankers in the temples of Sumer, issuing promissory notes and bills of exchange in clay tablets as the first forms of money. And these are the same royal bloodlines that are the bankers of today, the Rothschilds and Rockefellers and you know who else. And the same royal bloodline lineage that still controls the world, totally and utterly enslaved through their system called money.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. Yeah. So here's where I'd like to, and I have a little bit of feedback just so you know, but I'm going to try very hard to minimize that. Let's start from the beginning of these royal bloodlines, how this whole thing started. Well, maybe not that far, but at least your discovery about those stone circles and that whole thing, and then see if we can bring it up to now, where you have this Ubuntu movement and how you envision, this whole thing taking off globally, because right now it's in a certain part of the world, but we obviously would love to have that whole concept, ignite, and so everyone can live in that unity consciousness. But back then, when you started discovering these circles and stone circles and whatever formations, what was your impression then? And did you think these were ancient ruins, or what led you to the discovery of the fact that this was a little bit more than met the eye?
That's a very important question. I'm glad you brought that up, because the stone circles, the mystery of the stone circles actually goes back about 500 years already to the arrival of the first Portuguese explorers when they came around the Cape of Good Hope. And came onto the land where today you would find Mozambique, and met the local people and came across some of these stone structures and the stone ruins. And the native people at that stage lived among these stone ruins and used some of them. And we have this because it's in the records of these Portuguese explorers in the late 1400s already. And when they asked the local inhabitants at that stage who built these structures, they were told very clearly that they did not know who built them, and they certainly were not the creators or the builders of those stone structures. And as you come closer and closer towards current time, you start seeing the erosion of that information and that truth into what is now known in history books in South Africa. And these stone circles are referred to as mostly as cattle kraal or cattle enclosures that people built to keep their cattle in, and dwellings by migrating tribes. And they all ascribed to a number of tribes, whether it's the Bakoni people or the Tswana people or the Basotho people, from about 200 years ago to about 400 years ago, but nothing much more further back in time than that. And this is just a very clear indication how ignorant our historians and archaeologists have become by just regurgitating the same lies and disinformation from previous books, and then they just rewrite it because it was peer-reviewed in some other book, and therefore it must be true.
Sure.
And that's where you can see the absolute breakdown of this so-called peer review system that is imposed on scientists when they are part of mainstream academia.
Yep.
It is one of the most draconian fascist systems that suppresses knowledge and information rather than promotes the explosion of knowledge and information.
Yep, excellent.
And if people don't understand this, I urge you to go and do some research about how it works, because ultimately you've got some hick professor at some university, doesn't matter what university it is, whether it's Yale or I don't care which university or Oxford. They all have their agendas, they all have their students, they all have their books that they publish and their own theses, or whatever the plural of thesis is. I
love it.
And they have to promote their own views and their own theories, and if students don't quote them and don't follow the rules, they will not graduate and they will not get their PhDs and their doctorates. And there's an interesting, very silly little movie that I actually saw completely by accident just 2 nights ago, and it's called Accepted. And just check it out if you can get a copy of it. It's a very interesting movie that really hits deeply at and kicks you in the knees of or kicks the academic institutions right in the knees and exposes the draconian way in which they suppress knowledge and information. It's beautiful.
Wow. And it's called Accepted?
Accepted. Okay. It's a normal movie. And then there's another movie, since we are on the subject. It's a documentary that's presented by a guy called Ben Stein, which absolutely blew my mind. And this documentary is called Expelled, No Intelligence Wanted. I also recommend.
Oh, right.
Yeah, and that is quite serious, because he actually goes around the United States and Europe and England and to all the universities and places like the Smithsonian, and he interviews scientists, top-level scientists that have been expelled and lost their jobs, only to find that they will not be employed in academia again because of their views and articles they've written on the subject called creationism.
Wow.
As opposed to Darwinism. It's a phenomenal documentary.
Wow, that's amazing.
So, and I got off the track a little bit, I guess.
It's okay. No, it's okay.
I completely lost my train of thought, what I was saying, but we were talking about the stone circles, that's right.
Yes.
So by the time I was exposed to the stone circles by Johann Heine, I'd run straight into the wall of academic, ignorance and completely reducing these stone structures to historical structures of little importance. That's what many historians have actually quoted, or not many. Some historians, prominent historians in South Africa and archaeologists have quoted these structures of little archaeological historical importance. Well, nothing can be further from the truth. And the reason I say this is because if you think there were just a few hundred of these, or even a few thousand of these, maybe there'd be some semblance of truth or logic in that.
Sure.
But unfortunately, that's not the case. And my extensive research and study into the stone circle since 2007 has exposed that there are more than 10 million of these.
That's amazing.
And, the moment you see that, the moment you realize that you have this instant shock and awe download, and you go, oh my God, we're dealing with a vanished civilization that we don't know anything about.
Yeah.
And so I started looking at these structures, and I walked the hills around South Africa and right across many provinces, even into Zimbabwe, up to Great Zimbabwe. And incidentally, Great Zimbabwe, according to my research, was the headquarters or the head office of this vast vanished civilization.
Wow.
That was most likely the domain of the Sumerian entity Enki, who was responsible for all of this stuff, because it's all about gold.
Yeah.
All of these stone structures are all about mining gold. Goes back about 300,000 years ago to the origins of humankind, the first Homo sapiens that walked the earth. This is where they were, working in the gold mines for these beings called the Anunnaki. Now this is where we start getting the interesting cross-references from Zechariah Sitchin's work and other Sumerian texts, not only Sitchin's work, other Sumerian tablet translations as well. And it becomes very important because much of what Sitchin had written, he did not know that we were going to discover the sites.
Wow.
Specifically Adam's calendar. Now, one very extraordinary thing happened. I was racking my brain as to what these structures were, because one of the first things that struck me is that most of the original ones that you can see clearly are the very old ones that haven't been tampered with, have no doors and entrances. And they're just these circular, completely closed-in structures with these channels, like two walls that run out of them and then disappear to the distance and eventually fade away. And that was just really bizarre. I couldn't make any sense of that.
Yeah.
And when you start looking at aerial photographs, you can see these circular structures all connected with this network of these what are called channels. And some of our ignorant historians, once again, go on record and put in our history books that these channels were actually roads made by the African tribes of some 200 or 300 years ago, and they made these roads to drive their cattle on. I mean, it's just the insanity on the ignorance and the stupidity of writing this kind of stuff and going on record in official history books and official archaeological books.
Yeah.
On not only on behalf of the university but on behalf of the government as well.
Yeah.
It just blows my mind.
Yeah.
Clearly, these guys have never farmed with cattle.
Right. That's true.
And then something extraordinary happened. One day we were clearing one of the sites to make it accessible for tourists. In the beginning, when we started realizing that people are going to want to see these structures, and we had a team of people there clearing, moving the stones because they were all over. You'd sort of walk into the ruin and just be walking on stones everywhere. So you wanted to just lift them up from underfoot so you wouldn't be walking on stones and twist your ankle or something,
Wow.
And as I stood there looking at this team of people moving the stones, I heard these ringing sounds like someone hitting a xylophone or a marimba. Ding dong, ding 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 dong ding, as they were moving these stones and putting them down on a pile.
Wow.
And it suddenly hit me. The stones ring like bells. And it's sound. It's all about sound. And because of my background in sound and music, it was like a download that I got.
Yep.
It was unbelievable. And I went back to my little museum that I started putting together at that stage, and I picked up some of the stones and I rang them with another smaller stone to be completely blown away that the stones ring like bells. Beautiful. If you close your eyes, you would never ever say that you're hitting a stone. You'd think you're hitting a bell of some sort.
Unbelievable.
And that's what changed everything. That's when I started looking at the shape of the stone ruins, realized, actually, no, it's not true. But at that stage, I met a guy who had the sort of very advanced, sophisticated technology, who worked, he used to work for the satellite installation industry that installs, satellite communication for the telecommunication companies in South Africa, and he had all the right technology to go in there and measure sound frequencies and electromagnetic waves and other interesting measurements that I'm not going to go into now, but some of it is on some of my presentations as well.
Very interesting.
I suddenly realized that these stone structures which we measured, give off incredibly high sound frequencies. And that is as a result of the silica, the very high content of silica or the quartzite in the stones that are used to make these structures. So we measured incredibly high sound frequencies that go into the gigahertz. I think the lowest we've measured is, 11.5 gigahertz or 14.5 gigahertz. I can't remember clearly now. And the highest we've measured is around 375 gigahertz. But it's actually higher than that because the machine couldn't measure any higher than that.
Wow.
And that's at Adam's calendar. Now, what I've just told you is so insane. Nothing on Earth has ever been measured at those frequencies.
Yep.
And this is associated with electromagnetic fields, very strong electromagnetic fields that run both horizontally and vertically in these structures. What makes it very spectacular is that at Adam's calendar, some of the stone circles, they run either horizontally, creating like a dome-shaped effect or a roof, if you want to call it, or cover, and therefore it prevents you from getting GPS signal in there. When you walk in there with your GPS, you lose GPS signal. And that was a very interesting curiosity for a long time until we realized why that happens, because of these strong electromagnetic fields. And the electromagnetic fields are a result or a consequence of the sound frequencies in the walls. So now you got an interesting thing. It's the sound in the walls that is creating it and generating those electromagnetic fields.
Wow.
So, and at Adam's calendar, it gets even more freaky because there you've got the highest measurements we've made. It runs horizontally inside the sort of imaginary circle because there's no, in Adam's calendar there actually is no wall that creates the circle, and yet there is a very distinct, like you take a step forward and you're inside, you take a step back and you're outside of it. So it's a very strong field that's right there. It runs horizontally, creating this dome-shaped effect that again makes you lose GPS signal and connection to the satellites, because of this very powerful electromagnetic shield. But then you go between the two central calendar stones, and if you see them or imagine them like two giant, metal plates standing next to each other, vibrating against each other, creating a vortex field that spirals from the ground straight into the sky.
And have you been between those two stones? Have you been physically in there?
Oh yeah, I've been there many times.
What does it feel like? Do you feel like a certain vibration, or what do you feel when you're in between those two stones?
It's difficult to say. I'm a very insensitive bastard, I've been told. And
I don't believe that.
So I don't really feel the energy. I seem to be getting better at it, though. I definitely sense that myself. But there are people, obviously, and we've had thousands of people through there since I started doing this nearly 6 years ago now, taking people to the ruins and to Adam's calendar and doing more research and sharing the information. There have been people there that, when they walk into the circle, into Adam's calendar, I mean, they feel physically ill. They want to vomit. Other people go in there and they just go, wow, I feel such incredible energy. I just want to lie down and sleep. Other people different experiences.
Gotcha.
So it's really interesting. So, but what the measurements at Adam's calendar actually indicate is that we're dealing with a toroid vortex energy generator,
wow,
or a toroid vortex field that is generated at Adam's calendar through the sound frequencies that seem to be coming out of the Earth, and it's amplifying them. And you know, my conclusion from the measurements is that it is the flagship among all the ruins that was possibly receiving all the frequencies, all the energies from the other stone circles around Southern Africa, and utilizing that energy to probably, you know, beam up the gold that they were mining to some planet or some spaceship or something that is not on this planet.
Wow.
Just like you see in Star Trek, you know, beam me up, Scotty.
Yeah.
That kind of device.
Wow, that's amazing. So, is it safe to conclude, or you know, that these stones were put on there on purpose, or do you feel that it's due to the actual frequency of the Earth creating some kind of cymatic, you know, system, or some kind of like you know how the frequencies with sound actually create shapes and things like that? Do you feel that that's part of the frequency of the Earth, or do you feel it was induced frequency, or actually the stones were actually placed on purpose there?
Well, I think the critical question, Ari, it's a bit of both. The stones were placed there because of the detection of a specific frequency, obviously, that they wanted to tap into.
Okay.
And then as a result of placing the stones there, they found what the cymatic pattern was, or the shape of the sound at that particular place or location.
Gotcha.
And then they packed and placed the stones along the cymatic pattern.
Wow.
You know, like you would see, as you mentioned, if you put sand on a metal plate and you put a sound frequency through it, every frequency has its very own unique shape or pattern that the sand will take, or will create on top of the metal plate. That's exactly it's exactly what we're dealing with here. If you imagine every stone in a stone circle as a grain of sand, that's what's happening there. So they're being vibrated into the shape by a specific shape by the sound frequency as it comes out of Mother Earth at that particular point. But obviously they needed to know what that shape was, so there was a whole process that they went through. And now, once again, I believe that these are things that I must have gotten in some sort of download or something, because I just instinctively knew how they did it.
Wow.
And I had some interesting past life regressions from people I've never met that verified exactly what I had explained. And the way that they detected the shape of every stone circle before they built it was by placing ash on the ground, then putting or before they did that, they identified the area that they wanted to create the stone circle. They would put into the ground these long elongated stones that ring like bells. They look like French loaves of bread, many of them. They would place those in the ground and then activate them with some sort of a frequency. Now, for that activation, I believe they would have used something like an ankh, right?
Wow.
Or a device of that kind, and activated those stones in a circle to create a standing wave to start resonating together, and that resonance would then activate the sound inside the circle like a speaker, and then they would put ash in cover the ground with ash in the middle inside the circle, and then as this would vibrate, it would then create the cymatic pattern and the cymatic shape out of the ash. And they would then pack the stones along those cymatic lines.
Wow.
And that process is basically what they did by doing that, is creating an energetic plug point, or a plug point into the natural energy and sound frequency of Mother Earth. And so once they built it, it never stops ringing. It constantly creates the sound frequencies, and this is what we've measured.
That's insane.
So that these structures have been active and giving us free energy and sound frequencies from Mother Earth, which is free energy. Remember, that's clear. That is probably the only source of truly free energy that we have here on Earth. Because we're not burning water, we're not distorting it, we're not converting it from, H2O to HHO, or burning the oxygen or burning the hydrogen and destroying the molecule. None of that. This is pure sound, using the sound of Gaia as a source of energy. So it is given to us for free.
That's amazing.
By Mother Earth itself.
Wow.
And so what I've just realized as I'm talking to you, which I've never really thought of this, is that these stone circles, more than 10 million of them, and I have to assume that all of them will do this. All of them will give us this energy, because every single one we've measured has done this. Has shown we've measured incredibly high sound frequencies in the gigahertz and electromagnetic fields. So we have to assume that all of them will do that. And they've been doing this since the day that they were first built, some 300,000 years ago.
Amazing. So how do you translate that into free energy? I mean, what that would mean is that we can replicate that anywhere then, assuming that Mother Earth is giving out these frequencies, no?
Exactly. And this is really what my call is to the global scientific fraternity and community, to say, to the scientists out there that understand this kind of thing. And I've had hundreds of emails from scientists and, homemade scientists from all over the world, some really smart people that have given me incredible amounts of information about this. And so my knowledge of this keeps growing exponentially now, because it's got to that stage now. And so many people that want to come and help and want to come and get involved and develop this. But guess what gets in the way?
Money.
Money gets in the way. Every step of the way.
Catch-22.
Money gets in the way.
Unbelievable.
So, you got these brilliant minds, but they're stuck in a job somewhere. They want to come out and help and do this and that, but I can't afford to pay them and fly them out here and put them up and get the tools and equipment to do the stuff with. But so this is where we are.
It seems like the powers that be, the royal bloodlines from day one, knew very well what they were doing, and so they established, like you said, this money system to enslave us, so that in the future, if there is such a discovery of the free energy system that you've uncovered there, it would be almost impossible to do, because you need money. And it's amazing how intelligent that was. What a setup.
It was.
Yeah.
They knew exactly what they were doing, as you said, and it's brilliant. But you know what? Now is the time that we need to step back and stop displaying, signs of hatred and dislike for them, and we must rather say thank you very much. You've had your turn for the last 6,000 years or whatever it's been. And now that the consciousness around the world is rising exponentially, people are waking up every morning, asking themselves questions that they didn't ask before, thinking about things they haven't thought about before, and that's just a consequence of our DNA being activated. And you know that we have scientific evidence for the fact that our DNA is being activated, and that our so-called junk DNA is suddenly kicking into action and allowing us to free our thoughts, realizing what's going on, tapping into very, very advanced encoding in our genetic makeup that is bringing us closer to becoming divine beings that connect to the universal unity consciousness, or the source field consciousness, not universal, source field consciousness that is responsible for everything in creation. And we tap right into it with all the stuff that's encoded in our DNA.
That's right.
And this is happening on a daily basis. So as the consciousness is exploding around the world, people are waking up, they're going through rapid enlightenment. They're no longer prepared to take the crap from authorities and be enslaved, and suddenly realize that they have a right to free will and to live a beautiful life on a beautiful planet. And now we got to say, well, thanks very much, guys. You've had your 6,000 years of rule, and this is where the philosophy of Ubuntu Contributionism comes in very, very importantly. And I'd just like your listeners to think about this. If this is new to them and they can't imagine a world without money, you've got to realize one thing. For as long as we continue using the tools of enslavement of those that completely and utterly control the supply of this thing called money, we will forever be enslaved.
Yep.
And therefore, there is only one way out of this enslavement: to stop using their money. The moment you stop using their money and create a global society of utopian society of infinite abundance, where money never gets in the way of creating anything that people want or need, you would have automatically prevented them from any kind of control over humanity.
Yep.
If they can't control the money, they cannot control the people.
So true.
It is a spectacular realization, and I know that many people struggle with it. Some people get it instantly. Some people struggle with it because they can't imagine a world without money, because we are so indoctrinated and our minds have been so poisoned and so programmed for thousands of years with this thing called money, that there has to be value, that we have to exchange things, that you have to give something to receive, all this crap that we've been so indoctrinated with. That is completely so far from the truth, it's actually scary.
Yeah, yeah. And Michael, is there any type of training or something to allow people to get together, learn how to be able to form these type of communities worldwide? Is that available yet, or is that in the process of being created?
No, everything is right. We're in the starting blocks. Everything is brand new, and this is why I released the book, because I can't answer thousands of emails. Sure. And even if I put things on the internet, people still don't read it. So, and also it's a tool for raising funds for the movement. Sure. Obviously, because we're so trapped in this money system that we still need to use it to spread the message. Yep. And this is how sick the system is. We're using money to spread the message about a moneyless society. It's bizarre. I know. Well, it's intelligent. I mean, like I said, they knew what they were doing. They really did. Yeah. Wow. So my book, Ubuntu Contributionism, is, that's why I call it a blueprint for human prosperity. Get a copy of the book. Read it. Understand the draconian control. Only when you understand the draconian control and the absolute, how it has infiltrated every crack and crevice of our existence. It is unbelievable how money is at every root of every problem, everywhere. At every bit of misery in humanity and in human history. You'll always find the root of that is the money. Yep. It is quite uncanny. Yep. And once that penny drops for you and you start reading in the book how to get out of it, what we need to do to get out of it, how the different industries that we have in the world today, whether it's the energy, whether it's petroleum, electricity, transport, free energy, forestry, mining, minerals, industry. I've written all of this into the book, so to show people how these industries, how they will flourish and how they will explode in abundance or with abundance in a world without money. How the so-called world of scarcity that is being shoved down our throats is just part of the control system. Mm-hmm. We live on a planet of absolute abundance. Yep. This planet is so abundant in everything we can imagine. That is being destroyed by capitalism, by consumerism, and the corporatization of everything, and the ownership of every resource on our planet, and the control and the ownership of this control is then passed down through money and sold to the inhabitants, called the human race. Mm-hmm. It's a spectacular deception, a magnificent deception of unimaginable proportion. What people also realize is that money did not evolve, like I said, over thousands of years of barter and trade. And this is why it has been so cleverly woven into stories and ancient tales and so forth, how money is always there. Because they believed that, or they knew that if people thought that our own evolution as the human race has been accompanied by the evolution of money for thousands of years, we all believe that money has always been there and always has to be there. Right. And unfortunately, they've been busted. Thank God. So, absolutely. So now question. Go ahead. I'm sorry. No, just to finish on that, you'll see in my book I actually show an example of what I've been able to find, the very first form of money, which is in the form of Sumerian clay tablets. And it always goes back to the Sumerians, the oldest written record that we have of human history, and lots of the activities, most of the stories in the Bible come from the Sumerian tablets in their original form, and so does money. The first form of money were in the forms of Sumerian tablets. Now, who issued that money?
Right.
It was issued by the priest king. Mm-hmm. Who was the banker? The priest king was the only one that was literate. He had the knowledge that was given to him by the gods. Mm-hmm. Okay, and I'm talking about the gods with a small g, these other advanced beings of this knowledge that instituted this tyranny on planet Earth.
Yep.
And so the priest king that was bestowed this knowledge of writing, and he had scribes, and the scribes would then create these ancient bills of exchange and promissory notes and negotiable instruments, the same terms that we still use in modern banking today.
Yeah.
Bills of exchange, promissory notes, negotiable instruments. Mm-hmm. That's what banks work with. And because it was issued by the king, suddenly it had all this value. Well, that's where the lie and the deception begins.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, this clay tablet that I show in my book goes back to 2024, 42 BC. So it's more than 4,000 years old.
Wow.
And it talks about a guy that comes into the temple to deposit his 8 shekels of silver, and he receives, and the 8 shekels of silver were actually paid in lieu of interest, believe it or not.
Wow.
Already then they were charging interest. And he receives this clay tablet that then became the promissory note or the bill of exchange that had the value of the 8 shekels. So you can see that the global banking system goes back that far, and it was introduced by the Anunnaki according to the Sumerian tablets that are found, and that same system goes on today. So basically what I can say, absolutely without any question or doubt, that the entire global banking industry and financial system is the largest organized crime syndicate that humanity has ever faced.
Yeah.
The entire thing is a bogus Ponzi scheme to achieve one thing only, and that is to keep humans enslaved by those small number of families that have the exclusive right to create this money out of thin air. There is no value. It has zero value when it's created.
Yeah.
It only gets value when they sell it to our governments, and the people are then enslaved to pay back those pieces of paper with interest. It's a spectacular deception.
It is a deception. And on top of that, to make things worse also, we do have some kind of like a grid. Is that not true, that we have still in place at some point in our atmosphere that might keep a lot of stuff in place? Would you call that a matrix, or what is that? Would that also be part of the enslavement mechanism or technology that is placed over the earth, you feel?
Yeah, I believe it is, and I believe that technology was used. I'm not exactly sure how it was used, but it was used for various things, and that was first of all to hide planet Earth from the prying eyes of other beings of consciousness, mm-hmm. so that they couldn't see what the Anunnaki were doing, how they were raping this planet and enslaving a species that was created as a slave.
Yeah.
But at the same time, some interesting translations. But I'll come back to that. Just remind me to talk about the encoding of our DNA, because that's really critical to our ability to rise in our own consciousness.
Okay.
So what I stumbled upon in all this work is on the big question of enlightenment, and what is enlightenment? And when you start asking people and reading books on enlightenment, you get a zillion different answers, but most of the answers are just a different definition of enlightenment that doesn't really explain it.
Right.
And you keep asking, well, what is it? What does it mean? What does it mean? What does it lead to? What are the consequences? What causes a lack of enlightenment? So when you become enlightened, what is it that you gain? or that you lose what you didn't have. What happens with enlightenment?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And this is what I found with all this research, is that we seem, as the human race, we seem to be enslaved on 4 different levels, and it's only when you recognize our enslavement as the human race, as the species called Homo sapien, and we don't really even know what a species is, so let's rather say as the human race.
Okay.
So only when you realize and recognize that we're enslaved on 4 different levels that I've identified, only then have you reached what I call enlightenment, because then you've come to a level of understanding of what it is that you did not know, and therefore you are now enlightened with information that gives you the capacity and the ability to start activating your own DNA and reach higher levels of consciousness.
Wow.
I hope it's making sense.
Oh, definitely.
So this is what I've identified. We are enslaved on 4 different levels. First of all, we're enslaved physically because we are genetically created species, genetically manipulated and created to be slaves in gold mines originally for the Anunnaki. And there might be other variations on the theme and various reasons for it, but this seems to be the one of the primary reasons. So we're enslaved physically. This leads to a deeply confusing mental or emotional enslavement, because we're enslaved emotionally. Our hearts know deep inside, it resonates with the source resonance of the unity consciousness.
Right.
It resonates deep in our hearts, and we know that something is wrong, but we don't quite understand what is wrong, so we're confused and emotional about it, right? And we confuse true love with special love, and we confuse God with a big G with the gods with a small g.
That's right.
And this is a deeply emotional, traumatic experience for physical human beings with an infinite soul, or human beings of flesh and blood with an infinite soul connected to the divine creator, right?
Wow.
So that's an emotionally enslaving situation to be in.
Yep.
So that's the second level of enslavement. The third level of enslavement is that because of the genetic manipulation, we've only been given X amount of ability to think, and our brain is being structured and our nervous system is being structured in a way to actually act as an enslavement tool. And it prevents us from reaching high levels of thought and consciousness to be able to activate our own higher levels of consciousness and reach enlightenment. So we enslaved on the physical level, on the emotional level, and now on the intellectual level. And finally, we're enslaved on the spiritual level, because it seems from a lot of research, as you already know, that there's some sort of an energetic grid that the Anunnaki created around planet Earth.
Yep.
And that grid was to prevent our souls, when our physical bodies die and the soul goes on its journey to reunite with Source and do whatever it does that souls do when they leave a physical form. When they try and leave this planet Earth, they actually go through some sort of a shock therapy or whatever you call it. I think Ashiana Dean calls it the blank slate technology.
Wow.
Where the souls actually, the memory of the souls and the energetic field of the souls that connected to the Akashic records and the morphogenetic field out there, that it gets short-circuited, and the soul forgets where it comes from and where it belongs, and comes straight back into a body and being confused. And this is what's called the infinite cycle of forced karma of many lives. So, and a lot of people believe, karma, because they start studying this stuff and they hear this word karma and mean many lives, you come back to learn more lessons and all that. That is not true. Karma is an enforced enslavement on souls on this planet in human bodies, so that they don't know who they are and where they come from. Because you've got to ask yourself this question: surely if our souls are fractals, infinite fractals of the infinite creative source, how can that infinite fractal that makes your physical body up forget what it is and where it comes from?
Yeah, exactly.
It's an insane thought. So there had to have been some sort of a system, and I believe it's this grid that you mentioned, this energetic grid, and the Anunnaki seem to be the culprits to have done that.
Unbelievable.
But that no longer seems to be in place, and that grid is now broken down, and the last few thousand years is, I believe, when the souls started leaving, and when the destruction of the temples around the world happened, and the maintenance of this energetic grid was no longer there, and it started breaking down. Incidentally, this energetic grid is also encoded in many of the emblems of the U.S. military and the Air Force.
I've seen that. Wow.
It's encoded in there, and it often is shown in the form of these two bands, these two sort of like ribbons that run. They show the planet, and then these ribbons that normally cross each other. And associated with those ribbons are these delta shapes, the one or two or more delta shapes, and they explain those away as, oh no, those are just delta aircraft, like spaceships,
right?
Ships that, and that is not true. That's actually a very deeply encoded message that those bands around the Earth are known as the rules by the military and the secret military complex. And they refer to these rules as this energy field around planet Earth. They don't know where it comes from, but that's always been there.
Wow.
And then the delta-shaped craft, I believe, actually are referred to just one of the arms of a pentagon or a pentagram, which is connected to the golden mean ratio or the phi factor, 1.618. And it shows you that it is a physical enslavement prison planet that is created by these bands around planet Earth.
That's amazing.
And because the phi factor 1.618 refers to obviously the structure of matter and this physical reality that we find ourselves in, the golden ratio and so forth, and that is also encoded incidentally in, for example, the molecular structure of hallucinogenic drugs. You get a pentagon. In a molecular structure, you always have a pentagon attached to a hexagon, where a pentagon represents the physical form, physical body, physical reality, and the hexagon represents the perfect number, 6. Hexagon, 6-sided, which is also, 6 is also the number of a circle, or the perfect shape, as Plato called it. And the circle represents the sun, the infinite knowledge and wisdom. And so you go from the physical, when you take dimethyltryptamine, for example, that's the structure, or morphine, or pethidine, and all these hallucinogenic drugs has the structure. When ancient tribes and shaman take dimethyltryptamine to go into hallucinogenic states, they go from the physical, from the number 5, to the spiritual, to being in touch and contact with a spirit realm, which is the number 6. So in the molecular structure of hallucinogenic drugs, you've got this formula encoded. It's quite spectacular.
Wow. That's crazy. Now, you wanted to talk about the encoding of our DNA and our ability to rise in consciousness. That's really important, because this is where the discovery of the so-called junk DNA in the 90s suddenly starts playing a very important role, where I believe that the start of the enlightenment process and the explosion of the rise in consciousness began then already, when people started reading about the fact that we only use 3% of our DNA. I mean, why on earth would you create a creature with a DNA which is a blueprint for the physical form of what we have? It's not really the blueprint, but I'm not going to go into that, but let's call it that for now. Okay.
Because otherwise it gets a bit too weird. But all the physical stuff that we experience is encoded in our DNA. And so what is the rest of the stuff? Why would the DNA, because the question is, well, how did the DNA come into place? So this is the interesting question and I'm digressing again. This is the interesting question, the argument between creationists and Darwinists.
Yeah. And
this is where you're going to love this documentary called Expelled, no intelligence wanted. It's brilliant. It's just wonderful documentary.
I'm definitely going to catch that one.
The argument between Darwinists and creationists, where Darwin actually wrote this book, and his book is known Origin of Species, and the long word. Mm-hmm. Well, the origin of species, that's a deception, because he only starts talking about the sort of mutations within species and the survival of the fittest and natural selection and all those kind of buzzwords that have become famous, and how change within a species can occur over time and so forth. But he only kicks off once the thing has already been created, right? It already exists before it starts to take on different shapes. Where did that first cell come from?
Exactly.
So this is now the question. So how did that first DNA, which is actually RNA, that created the first DNA, came into being? Mm-hmm. And what intelligence created that with that particular encoding that then created the DNA, that then created the first single cell organism, that then created the mutations that created everything that we know on planet Earth today.
Yep.
So you can clearly see where the problems lie, right?
Oh, yeah.
So why would the DNA replicate itself and create 97% wasted space and only use 3% of it? It doesn't make any sense.
Yep. Yep.
It's like a capitalistic DNA. It built a huge mansion for itself with 1 million rooms, and it only uses 3 of those rooms.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So how do you feel? How do we activate all the other stuff?
Well, this is what's happening now. That there's scientific evidence of these incredible frequencies coming from the center of our galaxy. Mm-hmm. And these frequencies are light and sound frequencies of unimaginable proportion and numbers. And these frequencies have a profound effect on activating our DNA. It's like a key, like codes that are suddenly hitting us and activating us every second of every day.
Right.
Our DNA is being activated.
Mm-hmm.
And suddenly we're able to formulate higher thoughts and contemplate our own existence in a different way. And that starts to create a feedback mechanism. And the more you think about it, the more you activate your own DNA. And that starts to speed up the process and allows more of these frequencies that come from our galactic core to activate more of your DNA. And this is why people around the world are waking up every day and they no longer believe what they believed the day before.
Right.
But the other important thing is that 3% and the 97%, there's some very interesting information in the translations of Sitchin, where he talks about the Anunnaki, specifically under the leadership of Enki and his sister Ningizidah, his sister Ninhursag, and one of his sons Ningizidah, who seem to be the 3 sort of genetic engineers that were working on this stuff. And when they talk about the DNA, first of all, they refer to the DNA with a far more eloquent expression than we call it. We call it DNA, deoxyribonucleic acid. Mm-hmm. Right? What the hell does that mean?
Good question.
Yeah. And they refer to it in the Sumerian tablets as the entwined essence. Isn't that far more eloquent?
Oh, yeah.
As to what the DNA is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And there's an interesting thing between the Enlil and Enki, the 2 brothers, where Enlil just wanted a slave race and a slave species to get the gold out of the ground, do the manual labor so they could get it off this planet and do with it whatever they were doing with it. Mm-hmm. And Enki decided that he couldn't just create a primitive species that would be forever contained in a state of ignorance and darkness, because he knew if he had done that, he would have breached what our friend from Star Trek, Gene Roddenberry, calls the Prime Directive.
Right.
And Enki knew this.
Yep.
Enki knew that he could not violate the Prime Directive. He could not forever affect and influence a species to be reduced to not being able to rise in consciousness and realize that the species is part of the divine creation. So he did what he did. He encoded all of that information in that junk DNA, and that's where it sits.
Wow.
The other interesting thing, which might be just a coincidence, but I no longer believe in coincidences after all this research.
Right. Yeah.
And when you realize how all how language is being controlled, how the messages are encoded in our literature, in our Hollywood blockbuster movies, how all of this stuff is shoved in our face, and we just haven't picked it up before, but now we are picking it up, and we're waking up and realizing this. And all of this stuff is in my book as well, by the way.
Wow.
The encoded, the loss of understanding of language, and how the original sound frequencies that made up the original alphabet of 22 letters, which are 22 sound frequencies, were actually the primordial sound frequencies that allowed humanity to manifest instantly by creating the words, by speaking the words. They could manifest reality because they were connected to the source, and that was destroyed in humanity, in the human race. That ability was destroyed in the human race when in the Tower of Babel effect event.
Yep, so true.
So when you start researching this stuff, you realize that the Sumerian tablets refer to Enki and Enlil and the Anunnaki having these two mysterious items called the ME tablets. And they were crystalline, some sort of crystalline form tablet that had encoded in them, they were called the tablets of destiny, which had all the knowledge of the universe encoded in them. And they had two of these tablets. Now, I find this really curious because now you find different sources of information that refer to these ME tablets. And then you find other researchers and other people that connect and do downloads and talk to ETs and get given information by ETs, Ashiana Dean being one of them, that introduce us to these emerald tablets, or the CDT tablets, or the Cloister Doratura tablets, and of which there are 12 that are these crystalline holographic devices that have the entire history of creation encoded in them. Wow. And two of those were in the possession of the Anunnaki. And I believe that it is that information in those two ME tablets that are encoded in our human DNA. And this is why I call myself me.
Right. Interesting.
Yeah.
Wow, love this stuff. Totally amazing. And it seems to me that it all boils down also to sound being the creation force.
Source.
Force and source, because it seems like even from the Sumerians, where you have a lot of these, holding these cones. I mean, what was that all about? And even the stone circles. I mean, having to do with the frequencies and everything. It all boils down to the sound, the language, and everything. So, do you feel that? So, what's coming in is not only energy but sound. So, is sound the ultimate thing, force, source that will transform, humanity once and for all? Do you feel?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, this is why you listen to a piece of music and it'll reduce you to tears. It'll bring out emotions in you that are just that your body shakes. Photographs won't do it. Images won't do that. Right. Images are a consequence of light. Music is a consequence of sound. Only sound and music has the capacity to do that to a human being, to reduce you to tears, to make you an emotional zombie. No, let's not use the word zombie. An emotional wreck.
Right.
So it's incredible, and so there's no doubt. I mean, anyone that starts doing research in this will, no matter how far you scratch whatever ancient culture or civilization you go to, and you read their creation stories, and you go from the Bible to the Hindus to the Aboriginal people to the Mayas, to go read whatever you want. Each, and the Egyptians as well, each and every one of these ancient cultures, eventually you will come across that it was a sound or a resonance or a sound frequency made by the Creator that was the source of all things. Or the sound frequency and the resonance of the Creator was the source of all things, and that's just incredible.
That is amazing.
And this is where cymatics and the study of sound forming shape and creating physical form becomes very important. So the study of cymatics, and I also want to then refer people to the incredible work of John Stuart Reid and his partners with the cymoscope, what they're doing there, and the fact that you can levitate things with sound.
Yep.
Just today I got an email from David Deek, and David and I are going to speak. David is one of the first scientists in recent times to demonstrate levitation with sound.
Huh.
And
amazing.
And I'll be talking to David in 2 days' time, and I'll be posting that on the internet, our discussion. And since then, just last week, a Japanese university showed how they've taken the cymatic shape creation of the sand on a metal plate, and they've actually taken it to another level. What David Deek did is they actually now not only create the cymatic shapes, but they create them in 3D by stacking the speakers around the metal plate, and the sand on the metal plate now not only forms a beautiful pattern, it actually lifts up and creates a 3D image.
Amazing. And there you go. There's our solar systems, our galaxies, everything.
Yes, and therein lies the other important thing is this whole thing about the spiral vortexes and the vortex field energy that seems to be black hole technology that is in every aspect of our own body, from our nucleus in our cell to the atom of every nucleus of every atom in our body that makes up the molecules and makes up the cells in our body, to our bodies itself. That create a vortex energy field around it, to our planets, to our solar system, to our galaxy, from the smallest to the largest. All of it is based on black hole vortex technology.
Wow. Which also brings something to mind that, of course, when we listen to high vibrational music and just divine music, obviously it raises our vibration. And then you have this technology that's out there, like the cell phone towers and the microwaves and whatnot, that is there to bring down our vibration and pretty much corrupt probably all the DNA that is there to activate. So it's amazing. It's the war of the light versus the dark, I guess, is what we're saying, versus, in terms of sound.
Yeah. It definitely is. And what I must tell you is that we are under unimaginable onslaught by the powers that were, trying to still hold on to the power through ever-increasing draconian rules and laws and implementation of restrictions on humanity. And the more the consciousness rises, the more draconian and extreme the laws and enforcement of restriction on humanity becomes. Just look around you. Every day new laws are being forced on humanity that the people don't want. Yeah. And this is exactly what the Ubuntu Movement and the Ubuntu Party reminds people of, is that remember that our governments are supposed to be the servants of the people. That our government is supposed to do what the people want. It has gone so far out of control that it doesn't even come close to resembling anything like that. It resembles nothing more than a dictatorship, a complete and utter dictatorship, hiding behind these beautiful things called democracy, which is just another complete farce. A democracy is just a bullying tactic. It's a manufactured philosophy that's used to make us believe that we got freedom. Yeah. And it's just a tool of control. 49 of us, 51 of us decide what the rest of us will do. So screw the 49 people that don't like what the 51 want.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. So how does this all look like? In other words, we've got the whole concept of the Ubuntu movement, and in order to get this actually people to change the guard, okay? How do we get rid of the banksters, the globalists, the Illuminati? What do people have to do, obviously, besides, buying into this new consciousness of unity? Do you see it as marches? Do you see it as, protests? What do you envision? How does this whole thing evolve into that unity consciousness of the Ubuntu movement?
Well, the first thing people have to do is talk to each other, share their knowledge and information. If they've listened to this recording or this program and they resonate with it. They understand that this is the way to go. They go onto the Ubuntu website, and they realize that this is the way to go. There is no other way. There just is no other way at the moment. And even if you look at like the Venus project is really interesting, but unfortunately, the mistake that I find, or the problem that I have with the Venus project, they put technology first, and they put beautiful designs and all that first. All of that it's people first. First come the people.
Yep.
Everything else comes next.
Yep.
Why? Why can I say that? It's because people do everything.
Mm-hmm.
People plant the seeds. People grow the food. People build the rockets and develop the technology. And people, solve the mathematical equations. And people are capable of infinite love. Machinery and technology doesn't do that. People do everything.
Yep.
So it always has to be people first. What is best for the people? So any system that doesn't do that, I believe, is fundamentally flawed.
Absolutely.
And that's what Ubuntu is all about. It's all about the people first. What is best for you and what is best for the community, not just you as an individual. Because if it's good for the community, it'll be good for you too. And if you do something good, that is good for yourself and it benefits the whole community at the same time, now you got a win-win situation on every possible level.
Oh, yeah.
So what people need to do is start talking about this philosophy, realizing we have to get away from money, sharing this information with everyone they come into contact with. That's how we're going to spread this knowledge, plant the seed of consciousness into everyone's mind, as many people as possible. And we need to reach a critical mass among humanity that think this way. And
Yep.
critical mass doesn't mean more than 50%. Critical mass is actually a small number of people compared to the global population. Once you've got probably like 100 million people thinking like this, we've probably reached critical mass.
Wow.
For the entire planet.
That's fantastic. And so you're going to be coming into the States too to talk about stuff like this, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So the other thing that people have to do is those that have access to land and rivers and water. First of all, it's about having land that the government has very little say or control over.
Mm-hmm.
And in the United States, the tribal land, the Native American land, is prime land to do that.
Right.
Like in Africa, in South Africa, you got the tribal lands where you've got the tribal chiefs that control their land. They don't pay any taxes, and the government has a control over it to some extent, but the chief can actually decide what they want to do on that land and start developing these communities. And once you got buy-in from the people,
Yep.
once the people start buying into this and start creating these small, self-sustained communities and this is the key, Ari, this is the very important thing. You've got to start creating these self-sustained communities on land that's been gifted by people that want to do this, that has got rivers that you can put hydro turbines in there until we find free energy devices and start creating free energy for yourselves from the tools that we have, from hydro, electricity and solar and whatever you can to create free energy. Once you've got energy and electricity that you've got for your community, you're virtually home dry. Because that can then drive the technology and the industry that you can create for the benefit of that community. When I use the word industry, I use it very carefully. Mm-hmm. Not to exploit the planet, but to create benefit for the community.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
And developing new technology, and that is completely, free energy, for example, that I believe is coming any day now.
Yeah.
And once that comes, by the way, the entire global economic system, it's gone. It's a goner. Once you got free energy, you can't control people and their association in independent groups to live wherever they want. Because once you got free energy, you can live wherever you want. You can generate your own food and water, and you can do whatever you want.
Yeah.
So that is why the energy sector is the most fiercely guarded sector of the draconian control.
Sure is.
By the powers that were.
Yeah, all that will implode once we have free energy. Yeah.
Create these small, budding little communities that create not only abundance for themselves, and this is what I was leading up to, the critical thing. You've got to create abundance for yourself, but also let it spill over into your neighboring communities to make what you're creating, whether it's bread, milk, food, cheese, wooden products, whatever it is, that you're creating in your community. everything that you don't consume, you then make available to the communities around you at a fraction of the price that they can get it from their own capitalistic outlets.
Sure.
The moment you do that, you've shut down the capitalistic models that function around your Ubuntu community.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure you can see that.
I sure can.
Because if people in your neighboring town know that they can come buy a liter of milk in your town for 50 cents, while in their town they pay $3 for a liter of milk, they're going to go, well, what's going on there? How come I can go over there and get it for 50 cents? And they've got so much milk they don't know what to do with it. What are they doing? And suddenly you go, okay, well, they're doing it without money. And very soon, every community around you is going to be doing the same, because they realize that, first of all, you've collapsed their economic structure, because everyone is not going to buy stuff from their businesses. They're going to come to you to buy it from you.
Yeah.
So you've destroyed the economic structure, and you've allowed them to do what you've done for yourselves. By doing it for yourselves, making as much as you need for the community to consume, but then what I call the Ubuntu principle is the Holy Trinity principle. It's a 3 times production principle or creation principle. The Holy Trinity, 3 times.
Wow.
You create 3 times as much of everything that you need. 3 times as much water, 3 times as much food of every kind, 3 times as much building materials, 3 times as much whatever it is that you do, so that you can make it available in abundance. As
Sure.
free as you can make it available free, actually, if you want to your neighboring communities, because you're in that position. But you don't want to do that in the beginning stage, because you want to first collapse the economic structures around you, so that they then can do it for themselves for free. Without any money.
Exactly. Now, I don't know if you're aware of the situation here in the United States, but a lot of people who have their own farms and grow their own food, whether it's organic food and that type of thing, even when they have they're producing their own milk and it's raw milk, the government is coming in and shutting them down and actually arresting a lot of people. I wasn't sure if you were aware of that.
Yeah, I am aware of that, and this is how bad it's become. And if people can't see the writing on the wall, if you can't feed yourself, if you're not allowed to feed yourself in your community, clearly this has gone beyond a fascist state.
Yeah. Well, there has to be obviously something else in place to be able to bring down that which is preventing us to be free. So. So it's.
So this is why I say the free energy thing is critical here. The sooner we can get a free energy device into the global market, where everyone can have a little energy device that powers the entire house, that they can then attach to their vehicle, their car, or a motorbike, whatever. You don't use fuel, you don't use hydrogen. It's a free energy device, whether it works on perpetual motion magnetics or whatever it is. We are very, very close to getting that, I believe, literally, like, probably in 2014 we should have something like that. The moment that hits the world, I think it's pretty much over for the draconian rulers.
Absolutely, and it does have to be introduced in a manner that is free, free for all, in a way that it's not by greed, because then it's like you've mentioned in other lectures that once that money gets involved there, it just stops that whole flow, and nobody gets their hands on it. Yeah. A lot of these people are taken down.
It's got to be free energy. It's got to be free energy. It's got to be available to everyone, freely available to everyone. Obviously, in the beginning, you're going to have to buy the components while we still live in this world. You're going to have to buy the components, acquire them somehow, put together your device, but the information must be freely available.
Exactly.
Your ability to put it together so that you can put it together as quickly as you can, or ask somebody to do it for you and pay them $100 or $200 or whatever it is to put this little device together. I know a bunch of people that are doing it. We're messing around with some free energy devices. There are millions of people around the world doing it. Sooner or later, something is going to just come. It's going to be like a bullet, unexpected, out of somewhere, and it's going to be so simple. And this is the other thing with free energy. It's got to be simple. The simpler the technology, the more lasting it will be, and the more real it is. When you start seeing these complex things, and it's just like you look at that, you go, hold on, no, that's not how it works.
Exactly.
And I want to bring you back to the ancient technology that I've discovered here.
Yep.
And the reason I say it's got to be simple is because I found the simplistic technology from 300,000 years ago that was used by these people in Southern Africa while they were mining gold. And this technology comes in the shape of these donut-shaped stones.
Huh.
As Credo Mutwa calls them, the sacred stones. And for many, many years, I didn't know what they were. I couldn't understand what these things were all about. At one stage, I thought they were just frequency converters that were used with a cone-shaped tools to create laser and Saser technology that focuses the sound into the cone-shaped tip that then speeds up the sound until it leaves the front in a faster than speed of light and creates a Saser technology effect, or a Saser beam. And these donut-shaped stones are incredibly powerful energy-generating devices. You just put a sound frequency into the center, and it creates a huge energy field around these donut-shaped stones. And that's when you look at the shape of galaxies, they look exactly like a toroid vortex, like a donut shape.
Yep, absolutely. Wow.
And these stones are identical to that. And, they are very, very powerful stones. I know this because the stone that I had in my bag while we were on our way to the United States actually brought to a standstill the jumbo 777.
Oh my God.
On the runway, and they hauled me out, and me and Louise out of the airplane, and there were 5 guys with guns around my bag saying, "What's in your bag? There's a security threat in your bag, please open your bag." And I went, "Oh my God, I've got the stone in my bag." And only after I showed them the stone, and they were very perplexed and confused by this, they let me get back on the plane, and they didn't confiscate the stone by some miracle. It must have been some intervention from higher source there, I guess. And only when I was going back on the plane, Louise told me that the captain, while he was standing next to her in the doorway of the airplane, threatening to offload the plane unless we in the air in 2 minutes, and because it was getting too hot for the plane to take off. He said that whatever is in that bag crashed the NSA security system.
Oh my goodness.
And that was my stone. So when I tell you these stones are incredibly powerful, I'm not just making it up. I know, because we've measured them with electronic measurements. And thank you to the NSA for confirming that.
For confirming it, exactly. Now, you were taking that stone to Nassim Haramein, is that right?
That's right, yeah. So I handed that stone to Nassim. Louise and I took it as a gift. It was the best sort of example that I had in my little museum. If you go onto my website, you'll see my YouTube website, you'll see me holding that stone still in the museum before I took it out. And I gave it to Nassim to do some experiments with it. And I told them, just put some sound frequencies into the center, into that center hole, and see what happens. But be careful, because you might just create a black hole and disappear into it.
Right. Now, are these naturally occurring stones that look like that, or do you think that they were shaped into that with special tools?
Oh no, very much shaped. They were created. They were They were created out of using Saser technology.
Saser.
And this we know. There's no doubt about it. And the amount of energy. Just earlier today, I was doing some work, and somebody sent me an email from England and about this strange site, and I forget what it's called now. It's really interesting, but it looks like it looks a lot like some of these hexagonal structures that are found here in South Africa. The hexagonal shaped stone ruins that are built like honeycombs, basically. That make no sense, and I figured out that these were actually the original cloning chambers for the first human beings.
Oh my goodness!
Because remember, for the first few thousand years, humans were not, they weren't born to mothers, they were cloned.
Yep.
Like you see in sci-fi movies where these humans are hanging in these giant cloning sacks in underground caverns. That's exactly what is going on here. So they were cloning humans in these hexagonal shaped giant clusters of hexagonal cells, and there's many reasons why they're hexagonal. It's all to do with energy and frequency, and again, hexagon 6, circle's number is 6, circle is the perfect shape. It's the flattened representation of a sphere, and a sphere is the shape of a cell. So you start seeing the connections, right?
Right, yeah. Oh, yeah.
And this is why bees and ants and other insects grow their wasps and grow their larvae in hexagonal cone-shaped structures.
That's amazing. That is truly amazing.
And the same was happening here, and I digressed again so far that I forgot what I was saying.
Well, we were talking about. We did digress, but it was we originally started with Nassim Haramein.
Nassim.
Yeah, and then we started talking about the shapes.
You asked about the stones, were they naturally formed and so forth. So no, they weren't, and I still don't know where I was going with it. But, I was talking about England.
Yes.
I heard in England, and this ancient mine that they found, and it's completely covered in soil, and it resembles some of these hexagonal structures. And then alongside these images of this ancient mine, I find among a bunch of typical classic Stone Age tools, like Stone Age axes that you find in museums and archaeological, which are not advanced tools at all. This is now the fall of man from advanced technology to primitive use of stone tools.
Right.
Among those Stone Age tools, there's this beautiful cone-shaped stone, just like some of the cone-shaped stones I found here, just like this cone-shaped tools that Sam Osmanagij has been finding in the Bosnian pyramid, just like the cone-shaped tools that the Native American shaman use in the kivas when they have their sacred ceremonies, just like the cone-shaped tools you find in Egypt. And now I found the cone-shaped tool in England as well, in this ancient mine that they have no idea of the origin of this mine.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, so it's all to do with Saser technology, to do with, and it probably used for levitation as well, for drilling, for softening rock, for doing whatever you want to do with Saser, like laser technology, but Saser technology, which is infinitely more powerful than laser technology.
Unbelievable. That's just unbelievable. Did you now in closing, since we've gotten to the pretty much the end? I mean, I could keep going. I mean, I'm hoping that you accept my invitation to come back, because there's so much more, and each one is each phase of what you bring up is a book in itself. I mean, it's just. I'm mesmerized. I'm totally mesmerized by this information. And I, like you, started reading Eric von Däniken, Charity of the Gods, probably at the same time that you did, and fascinated with this stuff. Unbelievable, the information.
Eric, we've got to take our hats off to Eric von Däniken, because he was doing this in the days when there was no computers. Yep. There was very little aerial photography. Very little knowledge of genetics and DNA, and he just looked at the obvious clues and evidence, and he put it together and said, hold on, it doesn't make any sense, there's other stuff going on here.
Yep.
And so he was really, I think he was an activator for many people, like myself and you and many others.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, that's what got me down that rabbit hole. I'm serious. It's that knowing that information that it just triggers, and you go, oh my gosh, I know this stuff. Why does this sound so familiar? And so look what happened with you. Unbelievable. Michael, can you give the listeners the websites that you would like them to go into and do some more research on the information you bring?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, my website on the research and the stone circles is michaeltellinger.com. And I urge you to please sign up to my newsletters. Don't send me emails and say, when are you going to be in America? Or when are you coming to England? Just sign up to my newsletters and watch my website, and the notices will be up there. I can't, at this stage, between Louise and I, we're getting 1,000 emails a day, and it's got to a stage where it's just not possible to respond to people as much as I'd like to. And that's how we've built the relationship with many of our followers and the people that have been following my work and the people that follow the Ubuntu movement at the same time.
Exactly.
So michaeltellinger.com, and then also and all my books, and I'll be loading a lot of new videos and presentations that I've been doing around the world. That's a new addition to my website over the next week or so. And then the Ubuntu Party, go to ubuntuparty.org.za and join. It's not just a South African thing, it's a global movement. We got members in 185 countries.
Wow.
And then use the ubuntuplanet.org platform that we've created to communicate with others in your area and start sharing ideas and connect with other people in your area, in your town, in your village, or your county, or wherever you are, and start building the philosophy of this Ubuntu community, and start working towards making this a reality. So what Louise and I have started doing now is we've got volunteers arriving here in more than a week. Our first group of volunteers from around the world. We're going to have a total of 12 volunteers that are going to be sort of moving, coming in and out every 2 months. And we're going to start building this Ubuntu community here.
Oh, wow.
And start driving it by the will of the people.
Amen.
And we got to understand, if the people stand together and they're united, remember, we're the 99.99%.
That's right.
Not the 99%. The 99.99%. It is up to the people to decide what we will do. Stop the fear, lose the fear. If we all stand together and we all want prosperity, we stand united, we will get there very quickly.
Yep. It's
not necessarily an easy road, but it doesn't mean it's going to be a long road. That can happen very quickly if we all stand together.
Exactly. And folks, please, I would urge you to support Michael any way you can, especially buying his amazing books that are just, it's like going and reading Indiana Jones. I mean, discovering this all over again. All this information about our past and where we're going, everything put in a format that is easy to understand. There's a reason why his books are so popular. And don't forget to pick up a copy of Ubuntu Contributionism, a blueprint for humanity, for human prosperity. I keep saying humanity. Blueprint for human prosperity, which is going to be coming out this week, right? In South Africa, is that what you said?
Yeah, but it's available on Amazon as
Fantastic.
A physical book.
Yep.
So you can order it from Amazon. And it's available as a Kindle as well. And it's also available on my website as an ebook, a full-color ebook.
Wow.
Which is really nice. So yeah, you can either have the physical book or the full color ebook or the Kindle version as well.
That is awesome, and I'm looking forward to reading that one. So everyone, you've been listening to Michael Tellinger on Shattering the Matrix. This has been an amazing interview with you, and I am so grateful that you've been on our show, and I'm hoping again that you accept my invitation to be back on. Again, we're going to be going, every time that we go in, we'll go in more in depth with all this information and as to the progress that you're having with this new community. And so I thank you all. You've all been listening to R.E. Kopel, again with Shattering the Matrix. I'm looking forward to our next interview and to the next radio program that we're going to be having, hopefully with Alexandra Metters and also with Atona Arrayes. Thank you very much. You have a wonderful evening and stay tuned for our next show. Good night.